Chapter 43. How I managed to get off the stage and back onto the street, I don't know. I almost stumbled over a small, stooped figure who was brooming papers into the gutter. I hurried around the corner, scraping past a sign of Chinese characters lit up by a single bulb. Then I spotted my car. It stood there, just as I had left it. Somehow, I had feared that it would have vanished, that the world had been turned upside down in the scant hour I had been away. I tried to keep my pace and my breath steady until I could get the door open and my accordion onto the seat. When I had the door locked securely, I fumbled the key into the ignition. As soon as the motor turned over, I gave a sharp pull on the wheel, and the car leaped out from the curb. At last, I took a deep breath. I drove up Jackson Street to Rainier Avenue, then turned right and headed south. I came to Atlantic Street, the Italian community. It had seemed so foreign to Dora and me when we rode past on the streetcar on our way to Crystal Pool, but it was familiar to me now. I had been to parties there. I had tasted the spaghetti and garlic and red wine. My whole body burned anew. What would all those happy, spontaneous people say to me now? In another minute, I was approaching Franklin High School. I had spent 4 years there. No, damn it, 4.5. What a young innocent I had been then. I tried to tell myself, I am still a young innocent. This whole thing was not my fault. Maybe Papa would say I was an accessory, but I hadn't known. Try to tell that to the students there, to Mr. Lawrence, my music teacher, to my botany teacher who had flunked me. I continued driving around the school, past my piano teacher's house, the scene of another one of my failures. If Miss Meeker knew, she would flop over her grand piano, close to a faint. You should be at home practicing etudes. What are you doing instead? Playing the accordion? The accordion, mind you, in a Chinese joint, for a strip dancer. One thing was sure. I would never have my picture on her wall with her students who had attained success in the world. Finally, I came to Lake Washington Boulevard. It was dark now, but it was a scene I knew so well. The lake in the foreground, and Mount Rainier in the distance. We had met so many of our friends in the lake and on the mountain. What would they think of me now? As if in answer to my question, my headlights lit up a sign that warned of the dangers of swimming in the lake. Polluted. When I got home, Mama was still up. How did your job go? I wanted to beg. Oh, Mama, please don't ever make me go to a thing like that again. However, I had so hardened myself against Mama that I couldn't give her a civil answer about anything. I banged the heavy black case onto the floor by the piano and started towards the stairs. When I got to my room, I collapsed onto my bed without flipping on the light. I wanted to hide in the darkness to rid my spirit of my shame and guilt. From my very earliest memories, this was the one spot in all the world where I could come to, no matter what my feelings. A place for solitude in my times of distress, a place of sharing, where we 3 girls spoke of the secret joys and sorrows of our lives. Now there was no comfort. Since Fleur and Dor had married, our bed had become a place of loneliness. They weren't far away. I could be with either one in minutes. But would they understand? Not Fleur, certainly. Now that she was married, she was almost a stranger. I had visited her a few times after her marriage. She was living in an adorable little cottage right on the beach near Alki Point. I had been so full of questions. Fran, you'll just have to wait and see, and if you don't stop being so abrasive and learn to be a lady, you'll never get a chance. This was so typical of Fleur. She had such an easy time being Cinderella, and she couldn't understand why I didn't. It seemed to me that Fleur had everything. She even had a job. After her 2nd year at the university, she announced that, instead of finishing college, she was going to beauty school. Even if I graduate from the university, what are my job prospects? After finishing beauty school, she immediately began working in a shop. What else could a girl want? Her marriage had puzzled me. It had come about so casually. It was as if, one day, she decided, it's time I marry. Now let's see, who will it be? It may have been as simple as taking a Sunday drive and spotting a for rent sign on the darling little house on the shore of Elliott Bay and saying, I want to live there. Now let's see, who will I marry? Dor's marriage was just as much of a puzzle to me. She had so much potential. School had come easy to her. She had done so well in swimming. In skiing, she won most of the races at Mount Rainier. She won the Northwest Championships at Mount Hood. In the Nationals on Mount Rainier in 1936, she was expected to be a winner, but she had pulled tendons in a fall. The 2 winners who Dorothy had beaten consistently were sent to the Olympics. By rights, one of them should have been Dor. I could only conclude that both of their marriages had been a way out. With Fleur and Dor out of the house, it only emphasized another problem. Here my parents' child-raising days should be over. They should be free to travel, move into a smaller house, whatever. But what were they left with? Me. The one sandwiched between the beauty queen and the streak of lightning, who was always just carried along by their momentum. The one to catch the measles or the mumps or scarlet fever. The one who ran into the mailbox, got run over by a car, needed the big operation, fell off of everything, and couldn't keep her shoelaces tied. As I lay in the darkness, I realized that I had been happy with my position in the family. I didn't suffer from the too little, too big syndrome. Papa and Mama insisted that we do things together. When we were forced to pair off, it was Fleur and me or Dor and me, not often Fleur and Dor. Mama, who had been an only child, always told us how lucky we were to have each other. I agreed. I didn't need anyone but my two sisters. As we grew older, Fleur and Dor were open-ended. They had lots of friends. I didn't. I never felt the need for friends other than my sisters. Now I was so completely alone. In the days following the Chinese restaurant, I was paralyzed with fear that one of Papa's business friends, someone at the university, or a swimming friend or skier, had been in the audience. Guess where I saw Fran, and guess what she was doing. The only one I had ever been able to confide in was a girl about my age, a very good pianist, who accompanied many of the singers and dancers for shows. She was what I considered worldly, and was cynical about women's opportunities. She played the strip jobs as a matter of routine, and actually expressed sympathy for the strippers. Women have to do what they can to earn a living. It's easy to talk about principles, but can you stand up for your principles while you're starving, or if you have children that are starving? I had agonized about that. What if I was starving? Would I ever be forced to display my body? Or even worse, to sell my body? I would rather die than do that. I could never be a strip dancer. I was scarred for life. In all of my agonizing, my greatest fear was what Mama would say. She would look at me sternly as if she was from a long line of prophets and say, "God will punish you." Because of Mama's frequent proclamation, I had come to think of God as the man with the great razor strap, the one who kept accounts in Papa's black book. Yet, from others, I had received more encouraging messages. The preacher in Angel's Temple, where I had raised my hand, had said that God's great desire was not to punish, but to forgive. There was an incident on the Rainier Avenue streetcar when I was worrying about walking over Morgan Hill at dusk. As I left my seat and started towards the door, a lady who had been sitting close by reached out her hand and said, "Jesus loves you." There was the woman who had whispered in my ear when I was so hurt from the accident, and Miss Davis, my Sunday school teacher. Mama must have been thinking a lot about God lately. She had been receiving letters from her father in a rescue mission in Atlanta, Georgia. He was homeless, but his letters urged her to turn back to Jesus. I had heard her discussing it with Papa, and it made me think a lot about God, too. What puzzled me most was that many of the professors at the university were teaching that a supreme being did not exist. Dunny, now a senior, told me that science had proved that there was no God. We had been on the bus coming home, and I was amazed at his words, spoken so boldly. There is no God. As I had pondered all this, I realized that atheism was the best way out of being under the scrutiny of a punishing God. Just believe that God didn't exist. When I got home, I had told Mama that I was an atheist. Mama was shocked. I liked shocking her, and decided that I really would be an atheist. I was never completely comfortable with the idea because I knew this sounded completely unscientific. Every time I said, "There is no God," I would hear myself answering back, "What do you think God thinks about you saying that?" Now, in my misery, I was sure that God, if there was a God, would have already pronounced his judgment on me. Polluted. Maybe this made it possible for me to take my first big step toward breaking away. Until then, I had never openly defied my parents. Throughout all my difficult high school years, they had called the shots, and I had toed the mark. Even in college and my music work, I had toed the mark. Then one day, near the end of the school year at the university, I got an unexpected call. I was surprised to hear the voice of the ski jumper for Mount Hood, one of the most popular skiers in the Northwest. "Ja, this is Corey Gustafsson." I pictured Corey, tall and handsome, but unavailable. Though I had been in Corey's company several times at Mount Rainier, and though he had slept at our cabin when he was at the ski jumps in Snoqualmie, I felt I didn't know him. He explained that the Cascade Ski Club was inviting me to come to Mount Hood to ski in a race, the Rose Festival Ski Tournament, to commemorate the opening of Timberline Lodge. But it's June. We ski on Mount Hood in June. He explained that he and his brother Ragnar were presently working in Seattle, and that I could ride to Mount Hood with them. He ended the conversation. Of course, everyone wants you to bring your accordion. I was excited at the thought of spending 2 days at the Cascade Ski Club. It was considered the top club in the Northwest, not only in racing, but also in hospitality. All the skiers on the racing circuit knew that when they went to Mount Hood, they would get royal treatment. This was due in part to the happy-spirited Gustafsson family, of whom Corey was the oldest son. They had come from Norway to Minnesota in 1917 and to Portland in the mid-20s. They had been pioneer skiers on Mount Hood, and in 1928 had been part of a small group who founded the club. In the ensuing years, members of the family had held numerous positions, from president on down to pot scrubber. I was excited at the thought of seeing Timberline Lodge, the magnificent edifice built high on the mountain by artisans employed by the Public Works Administration. President Roosevelt himself would be officially dedicating it. I saw it as a chance to redeem myself from a fiasco I had had on the only other time I had raced there, the time I had fallen down at every turn due to my faulty equipment, while Dorr had walked off with all of the prizes. When I approached Mama and Papa about my invitation, they were just leaving on a short trip, expecting that I would take care of the house. I assumed that they would be as excited as I, but they flatly said no. I was grounded because of my grades. Going away for the weekend alone with 2 young men is not the thing for a proper young lady to do. After they left, I anguished. I was in good shape, and had new boots that didn't buckle at the arches. I had a special invitation, and a ride. Well, in spite of what they said, I was going. I shoved my gear into a pack, grabbed up my skis and accordion, and walked out. At Mount Hood, I won the tournament. It was one of the great events of my life. I had always been told that I couldn't do anything on my own, but now I had proved that I could.